Christine, how much does it hurt the WNBA when Caitlin Clark is out?
It is devastating to the WNBA when Caitlin Clark is out.
Now, I know a lot of us were expecting some sort of dip since Caitlin Clark has been out with injury, but I don't think all of us were expecting the entire viewership of the entire WNBA to be down. And this tweet from Christine Brennan really stuck out to me. She said one player gets injured and more than half the TV audience for the entire league disappears. Has any other athlete ever had that kind of impact on a sport? Golf without Tiger definitely dropped precipitously on occasion.
It was the injury heard around the sports world. But the real shock wasn't that Caitlin Clark went down, but what happened next. When the Indiana Fever announced on September 4th, 2025 that their superstar guard would miss the remainder of the WNBA season with a right groin injury, the entire league held its breath. What followed wasn't just a dip in ratings or ticket sales. It was a complete systems failure that exposed a fragile foundation of a sports empire built disproportionately on one phenomenal talent. This isn't just a story about an injured athlete. It's about how an entire league failed to protect its golden goose and the devastating consequences that followed.
Because of the way they play the game, because I love the WNBA, I love the way they play the game. But we really watch it because Caitlin Clark and everybody watching. Now listen, if I keep bumping her, knocking her down, might get her a concussion, you might hurt her for real. For 2 weeks, she was done with like a hamstring. She was down. 55% of the viewership was down. She comes back the next game, it's about 3 million viewers. Now, let me tell you something. Growing up in the hood, they teach you this. Always protect the money. Y'all keep hurting her and all that. She gone for a year or two. Ain't nobody gonna watch it. If nobody watches, how y'all gonna make it?
The numbers tell a story so shocking it seems almost fabricated. When Clark left the court, more than half the WNBA's television audience literally disappeared. Games that have been breaking viewership records suddenly struggled to maintain pre-Clark numbers. The league that had been riding an unprecedented wave of popularity found itself right back where it started, fighting for relevance in a crowded sports landscape. This is the untold story of how jealousy, poor management, and outright negligence brought the WNBA to its knees, and why the future of women's basketball depends on learning from these catastrophic mistakes. If you're passionate about sports business and how leagues navigate superstar power, you're going to want to hear this entire story. Make sure to subscribe and hit that like button.
And the truth is the truth, and the data is there. And what we saw when Caitlin was out the last time, the 5 games that she missed earlier in the season, the WNBA's viewership dropped more than 50%. Not just the Fever, but the entire league.
If you've ever wondered how much one player can truly impact an entire sport, let's start with the most jaw-dropping aspect of this entire situation, the television ratings catastrophe. Before Clark's injury, nationally televised WNBA games were averaging approximately 1.8 million viewers, numbers the league had never seen in its nearly 30-year history. These were record-shattering figures that put the WNBA in conversations with established men's leagues. But when Clark went down with her initial quad injury in May, followed by the groin injury that ultimately ended her season, the bottom fell out in spectacular fashion.
Clark went down. The WNBA ratings have dropped over 55% across the board.
Hey, guess what, guys?
The league is Caitlin Clark.
The league is Caitlin Clark. She is the WNBA, guys.
Sidelined with a left quad strain May 24th. National TV viewership has plunged since then 55%. Before the injury, the Fever, her team, were averaging 1.81 million viewers, almost 2 million. Since her injury, fewer than 850,000.
The data reveals a devastating 55% drop in viewership across nationally televised games, plummeting from that 1.8 million average down to a mere 807,000 viewers without Clark. Even more telling, games featuring Clark's own Indiana Fever saw a 53% decrease in viewers when she wasn't on the court. These aren't marginal dips. These are numbers that suggest the WNBA's much-touted growth was actually built on what economists call the Caitlin Clark effect. The phenomenon was so pronounced that it drew comparisons to some of the most iconic athletes in history. Veteran sports journalist Christine Brennan highlighted the unprecedented nature of this viewership collapse, noting that while other sports saw declines when their stars were absent, Tiger Woods in golf, Michael Jordan in basketball, nothing compared to the catastrophic drop the WNBA experienced without Clark.
As big a deal as Tiger was in men's golf, Keith, he did, and when he was gone, it affected the ratings, but nothing like that. And, Michael Jordan being out, maybe a 5 percentage points or something. Nothing like this. You can make a strong case, and I will make that case, and have that there is no one single athlete more important to his or her sport or tour or whatever the circuit is that they play on than Caitlin Clark is to.
Brennan pointedly asked, has any other athlete ever had that kind of impact on a sport? The context makes these numbers even more startling. The 2025 WNBA season was actually breaking attendance records, shattering a 23-year-old mark with over 3.15 million fans passing through turnstiles. But this apparent strength masked a fundamental weakness. Much of this attendance surge was driven by games moved to larger arenas, specifically to accommodate Clark-level demand. 15 games relocated to bigger venues drew 236,670 fans, adding nearly 135,000 to the league's total attendance, the equivalent of adding an entire 14th team to the league. Without Clark driving that demand, this strategy becomes unsustainable. The viewership disaster was bad enough, but the financial ramifications extended far beyond television ratings. The secondary ticket market, often a more accurate reflection of real-time demand than official attendance figures, told an even more dramatic story of collapse.
News is alarming for the league, and it's alarming for the league because this is such a crucial year for the WNBA. At the end of this season, the WNBA will go into CBA negotiations. If negotiations go well, then every single player in the WNBA has a much better chance of making so much more in their next contract. And that's one thing when you start thinking about how many people stopped watching when Caitlin Clark got injured. A lot of people stopped watching because they are boycotting the WNBA. They don't want to give viewership to any other teams or any other players, whether they like other players on the team or not, because of how the media and the league itself has handled Caitlin Clark and how they have treated.
Fever game ticket prices experienced a stomach-churning 71% freefall, with some premium seats plummeting from $860 down to just $250. The average cost of tickets to Clark's missed games nosedived from $1,370 to a mere $80, a mind-boggling decline that speaks volumes about who was actually driving purchasing decisions. Perhaps the most telling example was what should have been one of the season's most anticipated matchups, the Chicago Sky versus Fever rematch. With Clark playing, this game had pulled in 2.25 million viewers, making it one of the most watched WNBA games ever. Without her, ticket prices cratered from $210 to just $95, and casual viewers simply didn't tune in.
Man, bruh. Congratulations to the WNBA. Your ratings are going to drop by 55 to 60% once again. I believe the WNBA have successfully broken Caitlin Clark.
The message was clear. Without Clark, even the most compelling narratives and rivalries couldn't maintain their drawing power. The financial implications extend beyond immediate ticket sales. The WNBA was already projected to lose $50 million this year, despite the initial Clark-driven surge in popularity. Those losses are now exploding at an alarming rate. While she's not playing as television ratings plummet, merchandise sales stall, and attendance numbers crash back toward pre-Clark levels. Corporate sponsors who committed millions based on Clark-driven growth are now seriously questioning their investments, potentially creating long-term revenue problems that extend far beyond this season. The most damaging aspect? This entire financial catastrophe was entirely predictable. When Clark missed just 5 games earlier in the season with a quad injury, resale tickets for a Fever Sky game at Chicago's United Center dropped approximately 70% after her injury was announced. The warning signs were there. The league just chose to ignore them.
I don't even know where to begin, man. I hope Caitlin Clark is okay. I want to know when this injury even happened, bro, because let's be serious here. She has the quad injury. Mind you, Caitlin Clark hadn't missed a game since she was like 19 years old, since she was like 18 in college or something. Now she has a groin injury. We've never seen Caitlin Clark play as bad as she played the last 3 games. Let's just be serious here. She's like 1 for 20-something on threes in the last 3. We've never seen her shoot the ball this way. I'll say that. Has she been hurt and playing?
To truly understand the unprecedented nature of Clark's impact, we need to look at historical comparisons. When economists from MIT and Cambridge studied Michael Jordan's economic impact in the 1990s, they found he generated $53 million to other teams during the 1991 to 92 season, about $121 million in today's dollars. Jordan was making around $3 million at the time, approximately $7 million today, meaning he was capturing only a small fraction of his actual value. The parallels to Clark's situation are striking, but also highlight key differences. Like Jordan, Clark's value extends far beyond her own team. She's making opposing owners seven figures when she shows up, according to one industry source. But the scale of her impact relative to the league size is arguably greater than Jordan's ever was. As veteran sports journalist Christine Brennan noted, while Jordan's absence might cause a 5 percentage point drop in ratings, Clark's disappearance caused a catastrophic collapse unlike anything ever seen in sports. The Tiger Woods comparison is equally illuminating. When Woods was absent from golf tournaments, ratings definitely declined, sometimes dramatically, but nothing approached the 55% freefall the WNBA experienced without Clark. More importantly, golf had established stars and narratives beyond Woods, while the WNBA's recent growth has been disproportionately tied to one phenomenon. Perhaps the most compelling historical parallel comes from within the WNBA itself. The league has seen revenue and viewership plummet after its top players got injured before, creating a pattern it seemingly can't learn from. It's like watching someone touch a hot stove, burn themselves, and then immediately reach for it again, claiming they had no idea it was hot. Here's where the situation moves from concerning to outright baffling. Despite Clark's demonstrable, quantifiable importance to the league's financial health, the WNBA has consistently failed to adequately protect its most valuable asset. This isn't just about basketball physicality. It's about a fundamental failure to recognize and safeguard what drives economic value. The evidence of targeting is overwhelming. 5 of the league's 30 egregious fouls against Clark happened just in the 2024 season, with the Chicago Sky being responsible for a ridiculous 80% of those flagrant fouls. If Clark reacts to the physical play, she gets criticized for being overly combative. If she doesn't react, she gets called soft. The league has engineered a no-win scenario for her, while being completely unwilling to implement consistent protection for their biggest draw. The contrast with other professional sports leagues is glaring and honestly embarrassing. What if the NBA allowed players to use dirty tactics to target LeBron James for months, all while maintaining that the sport was just competitive? That league would shut it down immediately and suspend players without hesitation. But the WNBA seems perfectly content to let this damaging trend continue, operating under the dangerous assumption that any attention, even negative attention, is good attention. This failure extends beyond officiating to overall player management. Clark never missed a game during her 4 years at the University of Iowa or during her rookie WNBA season in 2024. Yet in her second season, 3 separate injuries sidelined her for 28 of 41 regular season games. The question must be asked, was enough done to protect her from the wear and tear of increased physical attention? The league's attitude toward protecting its stars became especially glaring during the All-Star Weekend in Indianapolis. While the event was supposed to be a celebration of the league's growth, it was overshadowed by Clark's absence due to injury and players wearing shirts that read, "Pay us what you owe us," during CBA negotiations. The irony was palpable. The very players who benefited from Clark-driven revenue growth were simultaneously demanding more money, while the league failed to protect the goose laying the golden eggs. To understand the full impact of Clark's absence, we need to examine the injury timeline that ultimately derailed her season and sent the league into a tailspin. Clark's injury troubles began surprisingly early, with left leg soreness that sidelined her for the Fever's preseason opener on May 3rd. Though she returned the following day, it was a warning sign that went unheeded. The first major injury occurred on May 26th, just 9 days into the regular season, when the Fever announced Clark would miss at least 2 weeks with a left quad sprain. Indiana went 2-3 in the 5 games she missed from May 28th to June 10th. Her return on June 14th was spectacular. 32 points, 9 assists, and 8 rebounds to hand the defending champion New York Liberty their first loss of the season. But the reprieve was short-lived. On June 26, just 12 days after her triumphant return, Clark was ruled out again with a left groin sprain. She missed 5 more games during this stretch, with the Fever going 3-2 in her absence. Her return on July 9th was less spectacular. 10 points, 5 rebounds, and 6 assists in a loss to Golden State that dropped the Fever to 9-10 on the season. The final, season-ending blow came on July 15th, in the final minute of a win over Connecticut. Clark pulled up while driving toward the basket, dished a bounce pass, and then immediately grabbed inside her right thigh. Visibly frustrated and fighting back tears, she left the court covering her head with a towel. What initially seemed like another short-term setback turned out to be the end of her season, a right groin injury that would keep her out for the remainder of the 2025 campaign. The Fever's official statement on September 4th made it clear, "There's not enough time left in our season for her to safely return, and her long-term health and well-being remains our top priority." Clark herself expressed her disappointment, stating, "I spent hours in the gym every day with a singular goal of getting back out there. Disappointed isn't a big enough word to describe how I am feeling." While the television ratings and ticket sales numbers are the most visible impacts of Clark's absence, the repercussions extend far beyond these obvious metrics. The Indiana Fever's playoff chances took a significant hit without their superstar guard. According to ESPN's analytics, the Fever's title chances dropped from 2% with Clark to just 1.6% without her. While this might seem like a small decrease, it represents a 20% reduction in their already slim championship hopes. The advanced metrics tell a more compelling story. The Fever were 7.5 net points better when Clark was on the court and had an 8-5 record in games she played. Without her, they went 12-13. These numbers underscore her value not just as attraction, but as a genuinely impactful player who made her team significantly better. Clark's absence also affected the team's composition and strategy. The Fever lost 5 players total to season-ending injuries. Clark, fellow guard Sydney Colson, knee, Ari McDonald, foot, and Sophie Cunningham, knee, and forward Chloe Bibby, knee. This forced Indiana to make emergency roster moves, signing veteran guards Odyssey Sims and Aerial Powers to hardship contracts. While both brought postseason experience, combined 55 WNBA playoff games, they couldn't replace Clark's unique gravity on the offensive end. Perhaps the most significant ripple effect involves the upcoming collective bargaining agreement negotiations. The WNBA is set to enter CBA discussions at the end of the 2025 season. Players are pushing for significant salary increases, some arguing for $1 million maximum contracts, but the league has maintained it can't afford such increases. Clark's absence and the resulting viewership collapse creates a difficult bargaining position for players. As one commentator noted, when it's time for that collective bargaining agreement, they're going to point to this and say, "Well, how can we give you guys all this money? What happens if she gets hurt?" This creates a paradoxical situation where Clark's value is simultaneously the player's strongest argument for increased compensation and their biggest vulnerability in negotiations. If one player's absence can cause such catastrophic revenue decline, league owners may argue against building a financial structure that depends on superstar presence for sustainability. Beneath the immediate drama of Clark's injury lies a more fundamental problem. The WNBA's business model was structurally unprepared for the explosive growth that Clark catalyzed. The league's ownership model creates inherent limitations. The NBA owned half of the league before 2022, when the WNBA sold 16% of its equity in a $75 million capital raise, diluting the then 12 teams' total stake to 42%. This complex ownership structure has direct financial implications. While NBA players receive 50% of basketball-related income, WNBA players don't have a similar revenue-sharing provision. Player salaries currently account for less than 10% of revenue, a strikingly low figure compared to other professional sports leagues. The current CBA does have a mechanism for revenue sharing if certain targets are reached, but because those targets are cumulative, the WNBA hasn't caught up despite recent rapid growth. The media rights situation further illustrates this structural challenge. The WNBA recently signed the richest media rights deal in women's sports league history, approximately $200 million annually over 11 years with Disney/ESPN, NBC, and Amazon starting in 2026. While this represents a significant increase from the current $50 million in total media rights, it's important to note that these details were agreed upon before the start of the 2024 WNBA season and before Clark Mania officially began. This timing is crucial. It means the league's media rights valuation doesn't fully capture the Clark effect that would become so apparent during her rookie season. The agreement does include a look-in provision in 3 years that could increase the value, but experts remain skeptical about how much renegotiated deals would be worth. Even if all the new TV revenue were funneled into players' salaries, the individual max would still be only around $1.25 million, far short of what some argue superstars like Clark are worth. The fundamental issue is that the WNBA's business model wasn't designed for, and has adapted to the kind of superstar-driven growth that athletes like Clark can generate. As one economist noted, the WNBA is hamstrung by this because if they tell the amazing story of what's going on in their league in terms of revenue, then they have to explain why the players are paid so badly. The catastrophic impact of Caitlin Clark's absence exposes the WNBA's fundamental vulnerability. Despite record attendance and unprecedented growth, the league remains dangerously dependent on one transcendent talent. The 55% viewership drop, 71% ticket price collapse, and broader financial implications reveal a sports enterprise that hasn't yet built a sustainable model beyond its superstar phenomenon. What makes this situation particularly frustrating is that it was entirely preventable. The league had multiple opportunities to protect its most valuable asset, from implementing stricter officiating standards to managing her workload more carefully, but failed to act decisively. The pattern of physical targeting that emerged early in Clark's rookie season continued into her second year, ultimately contributing to the injuries that derailed her season and the league's momentum. The WNBA now faces a critical juncture. The upcoming CBA negotiations will force a reckoning with the league's financial structure and revenue-sharing models. The dramatic demonstration of Clark's value strengthens the players' argument for increased compensation, but also highlights the league's vulnerability to superstar absence. Finding a balance between fair player compensation and sustainable business model represents the greatest challenge in the WNBA's history. Beyond financial considerations, the league must address its approach to protecting superstars. The physical targeting that Clark experienced and the league's hesitant response created an environment that ultimately damaged the product for everyone. Implementing consistent, forceful protection for all players, but particularly for drawing cards who drive viewership, isn't just good business. It's essential for the sport integrity. The most hopeful historical parallel might come from Michael Jordan's second NBA season. After winning Rookie of the Year like Clark did, Jordan was limited to 18 games by a foot injury. The following season, he averaged a career-high 37.1 points per game and finished second in MVP voting. There's WNBA precedent too. Io Wilson went from averaging 20.7 points as a rookie to 16.5 in year 2 due to injury, then won MVP the following season. If the WNBA can learn from this catastrophe, protecting its stars, building a more sustainable business model, and creating structures that allow all players to thrive, the Clark interruption could become a turning point rather than a tragedy. But if the league returns to business as usual, failing to address the fundamental issues exposed by her absence, it may squander the greatest opportunity in women's sport history. The truth is undeniable. Caitlin Clark is more than just a basketball player. She's an economic force of nature who exposed both the potential and the fragility of women's professional sports. How the WNBA responds to this revelation will determine not just Clark's future, but the future of the entire league. If this deep dive into the business of sports surprised you, or if you've been following the Caitlin Clark phenomenon from the beginning, share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more content that goes beyond the headlines to examine the real stories shaping sports, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next investigation.